Welcome to the Get Found Radio podcast. This is the show for entrepreneurs that are ready to get found and land clients so you can live your purpose. Here's your host, Jared Warner.
All right, Tim, welcome to Get Found Radio.
Thanks, Jared. Awesome to be here today.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. And for the listeners, we're going to do a little bit different episode than we normally do. Typically, we do kind of sort of a soft hot seat style. But today, I've brought on Tim to talk about automation. And we're going to discuss things you might not know exist with automation, as well as things that you need to know. And what Tim calls essential things for automation that every business should have. So with that, Tim, I'll turn it over to you. You can start us off wherever you like.
Yeah, cool. I think probably the place I want to start is that people think automation is super complex, and certainly when you get into some of the systems that are out there in the market that allow you to do a lot more stuff than just what I would call sequential, as in, action, next action, next action, next action. People get confused with them and they find they're really hard. And the real thing about that is not the tool itself that is difficult to use. It's more your understanding of what processes that you're trying to unpack to put into that tool for it to do for you. And it's not an easy thing to set up to start with. Right? It's certainly going to take a lot longer to set up to start with. So that in the long term you save a lot of time.
Yeah, I think for most people they don't even know what's possible, so that really puts a damper on knowing what to do because they don't even know what's possible. Yeah,
absolutely. And it does take a little bit of skill to actually step back from your business and look at all the routine activities that you do in your business that you really should be following up. Right. So, if anyone listening goes to a networking event, a lot of us have been to networking events, as we were talking about this before we came on here, Jared. One of the routine situations for a networking event is we take someone's business card, we add it to our database, and we send one or more follow-up messages to the person we've, taken that business card from to follow up with the intention of getting, a face-to-face meeting or getting them onto a webinar or downloading a resource of ours. That's a routine situation. So every time I meet someone at a networking event, this is a classic case for an automation to have a sequence of follow-ups. Now we've got to tie in some of our offline activities with our online and automation sort of stuff. So I know, for example, that every time I have a conversation at a networking event, I'm seeding generally one or two ideas in that conversation, knowing that my follow-up sequence, my automated follow-up sequence references that conversation. If I don't reference the conversation or some of the things I've talked about in that conversation, my automated follow-up sequence starts to seem a little bit incongruous with the message I've been putting out there, in those face-to-face conversations. And that's where people, I think, get tripped up in the stuff that you would have seen in your inbox that's, quite often triggered by automation, starts to look a bit disingenuous. It starts to look like, I never talked to this person about that, or I didn't meet them yesterday. And those kinds of things sort of trip people up a bit, and it starts to actually do more damage to the relationship than you're actually trying to build. And right. The goal of any automation is to do, what you would do anyway. So if I would send a message to someone after a networking event, that's, what I'm really doing is leveraging my time and kind of referencing the conversation, right? So we need to be a little bit clever about how we do those follow-up sequences and reference, the previous action and then hint of then future action we want somebody to take. If we just do stuff in isolation, it doesn't really do anything, right? So another example, and this is something I suggest everybody do, you need a lead magnet, adds value to your ideal prospects, life, or answers a couple of questions for them. A very simple automation that most people would have been aware of if they've ever downloaded anything from the internet is opted in for a lead magnet. We see them on Facebook all the time. We see them people's websites, and then there's a short nurture process afterwards. But if you just capture that person's information and then deliver the lead magnet with no follow-up process, you're missing out on an opportunity to nurture that relationship.
Right, and there's a lot of people that do that. So let's talk about some other stuff that you think somebody, or you think most people listening don't know exists, but they need to know right now.
But it's right now. Well, there's the 3 or 4 that I recommend everybody put into their business. And look, automation can do all sorts of things. I have automation that sends my wife flowers periodically, and it stops the campaign when I'm using Infusionsoft, so it's got a bit more capability than some of the others, and it allows people to do what I would call conditional automation based on certain other activities. So I've got one that sends her flowers periodically. It changes the message to her favourite florist. It changes the amount of the order. It changes the style of flowers that she's done. It stops the whole campaign around her anniversary, so she's getting flowers a week before, then on her anniversary, and then pops her back into the sequence where she needs to be. But the ones that I recommend that everybody have, certainly a capture and nurture. And the general guide for that process is offer something of real value. Stick it on your email signature, stick it on your Facebook page, stick it on your LinkedIn page, stick it on your website. Something that really answers something that your customer is curious about. So, Jared, in your case and in my case, we would talk a lot about marketing. So we would talk about the 5 essential things that you should do in your business right now, to generate heaps of your ideal customer and no tire kickers. And a lot of people sort of look at it and go, I'm interested in that. Let me grab it.
I'll give a suggestion too. If somebody can't come up with an idea, just take anything you would put on an FAQ page and answer that in a digital form, one way or another, whether it's a checklist, a simple video, whatever. You're going to have certain questions that people are continually asking. They're asking all the time because they want the answer. And rather than you having to take time to pick up the phone or answer an email or chat or whatever, you can get them to opt in for that same thing that they've probably been asking about anyway.
Yeah. And look, if you don't know what those things are, if you don't have an FAQ, take a notepad when you talk to your next 10 clients and see what commonality, what are the questions that they ask you that are in common across all of those clients. And you'll find something there that you can sort of expand out into a lead magnet. And normally what I would suggest in terms of the automation process after that is deliver the lead magnet. You can do some really cool stuff with automation now that allows you to add those people into custom audiences in Facebook. And it's really important at this stage because someone's just discovered your brand. You sort of hit them from a number of different channels and appear all over the place.
Right.
So if you're not only delivering a lead magnet to someone's inbox, potentially sending them a text message to say, hey, I've just delivered over your lead magnet. Hope you find it valuable. Adding them into a custom audience on Facebook that either just does something simple like brand presence and like my page, or potentially even points them at the next thing that you want them to do. Right? So thank you for downloading my lead magnet. We've got this awesome webinar that you can opt into. But the thing is we want to do when we do that automation is we want to design the add value, and then ask them to do something. Right? So it might be schedule a 15-minute call with me, and then link off to your online calendar. So when we're doing that, you're building a relationship. And I suggest everyone think about automations on building relationships in context of a dating relationship. Now, for those of you married, you're fine. You probably sort of look back and say, I didn't pop the question the first time I met my significant other. Those of you who are single probably go, I probably don't cop the question the first time I go in and meet a guy or a girl in a bar. We've got to build a relationship. And in the context of dating, it's, hi, how are you? Can I buy you a drink? What do you do for work? You look pretty, blah, 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 blah. Whatever it happens to be. But we're building a relationship with small little micro moments that move someone to a call to action. And the call to action in dating might be, would you like to dance? Right? In our marketing and our business, it's, would you like to have a conversation about what's the next thing that we can help you with? But you've got to earn the right to have that conversation first.
Right. And I'll add that I'll add that when you're adding those custom audiences, and I know this might be above some people's head with how to do that, but for the people who it's not, and to help other people understand the logic behind doing something like this, is you're just having a digital conversation, and whatever the lead magnet or whatever the offer they took, whatever the next thing you would say to that person if they were super interested, that's what you would say in your ad, and you just continue that digital conversation, and then they take the next step, and then you take the next step, and they take the next step, and you take the next step. So you need to set things up so wherever they go, you're prepared to answer back digitally until you have a a real conversation.
Yeah, that's right. And you're sort of mapping out all the possible combinations of conversations that could happen based on what your customer would say back to you. And for those of you who've ever written sales scripts, there's certain points where if the customer answer yes, you say one thing. If they answer no, they say something else. In some cases, it may not matter what the customer replies to. With you go on to the next part of your script, and that's effectively what we're doing here. Some of the other things you can do with those sorts of areas is also start to segment based on where people are from. So, for example, we've got different spelling in Australia. We use Australian English. In the US, you use obviously American English. So it's slightly different spelling in a lot of things, and you can actually start to segment and push people down into different paths based on where they are or what they do. So I can recognize, who's from the US, and all the emails that would go to customers in the US would go with US spelling. All the emails that would go to Australian would come with Australian English. So you can start to do, some interesting things like that, or even apply from different people. They may be real or not, but if you've got someone who's responsible for sales on the East Coast of the US, you could have the email come from them. If there's someone responsible for sales on the West Coast, you could have the email come from them. And they've never actually touched, that sequence, but just started to segment based on where people are coming from or what actions they're doing.
There was one thing you had touched on earlier regarding conditional automation.
Yep.
Let's talk about that for a sec.
Conditional automation is an ability to segment and push your customer down a different path of conversation based on either actions they do or things they've done, or in some cases where you've triaged and put a different message on. Right? So what we can do is actually start to track, it might be what pages on your website you've been to. It might be I've clicked on a link or I haven't clicked on a link. Right? So we can track and push people into different, I'm not sure that's a very good description, Jared, but
right.
If people do action A, we send them down, follow up sequence A. If people do action B, right, or don't do action A after a certain period of time, we push them down follow up sequence B. Right? I have seen some automations set up where people are watching videos or webinars, and if you only watch the first 20 seconds or don't watch the video at all, you're sent down a path that says, hey, well, thanks for showing up. They push them down into sequence B, which starts to talk about saying, hey, it was great that you could join us for most of the information, but you missed our punchline, our call to action. Here is our call to action again. Do this next step. Right? If someone watches the entire thing, we can move them down into sequence C, which says, thanks so much for watching the entire video. We really appreciate you sticking around for the whole thing. Here's what you need to do now.
Yeah, the other one I like that people should be doing is if somebody visits their pricing page multiple times or visits, a product page, a specific product page a number of times, they're showing interest. So this is like the same thing as if you had say you have a retail store and somebody comes in to visit your store and they look at the same item all the time, and then you recognize them and they come in and, say this happens 3 times over, a 10-day period. If that was happening in person, you wouldn't just go, oh yeah, hey, how's it going? Yep. Yeah, go ahead. Look at the item over there. Yep. All right. Have a nice day. You would understand that they're showing interest. So we can do that in the digital world. And we should be doing that in the digital world.
Yeah, so you can have it, if they do that, you could have it raise a task after 15 minutes was for a salesperson to reach out. One of the ones I've set up for a client who's a jeweler, she sends out a fortnightly newsletter and has some triggers on her site. And we've segmented down to 3 different styles. So by colour, by style of jewellery, and type of jewellery. Right? So she's got a couple of custom designers on it. Right? So if people visit the red, people look at red jewellery, right, we tag them as being interested in red jewellery. If they keep looking at red jewellery, not necessarily in this visit, but over a series of visits to her newsletter or to our website, we start increasing the level of engagement with red jewellery until such time as, they might have looked at red jewellery 3 times in a 2-week period, and we automatically trigger a newsletter or a custom newsletter of catalogue of red jewellery to that person, which has increased their sales by around 40%. If people looked at cufflinks or earrings, again, same process. We say, okay, look, you seem to be really interested in earrings. Let me send you our catalogue of just earrings. And you're starting to actually have a very focused conversation with someone about their interests. And we've got to remember, that everyone is an individual. As easy it is to try and treat everyone exactly the same, everyone likes to be treated as an individual. And we do that in a retail context when someone walks into our store. We need to do that in a digital context as well. The one thing that turns everybody off is having this generic newsletter, which is super long and none of it's relevant to you. It goes straight to, generally goes straight into spam after a little while.
Yep. Yeah, no doubt.
All right, let's get into the second one. Second automation that I think everyone should have is a sales follow-up process. And this is where we start to do a little bit of triage, particularly if you're doing online sales or phone sales. It can be relevant in a face-to-face context as well. But there's generally going to be 4 responses that you're going to have when you're trying to get in touch with someone. The first of those is you didn't get in touch with them. Right? And this is where we can start to save a little bit of time. So you should have an automation sequence that when you get a voicemail, that it automatically triggers a follow-up email to say, hey, Jared, just trying to get in touch with you. Here's my number. Give me a shout back. And then within a couple of days, as it raises another task to bubble back to the surface. If you rely or leave it up to your customer to call you back, you're missing a massive amount of opportunity because they're busy. Right? What you're trying to sell isn't necessarily their top priority. So if you don't put it back to the surface again, and an old school would have been, have the conversation, type out the email, and then go to your calendar and diarise it. An automation, you can actually have all 3 of those things automatically happen. That it sends the email on your behalf, diarises that you've tried to make a call so you can keep a conversation history, and raises the task within a few days for you to follow back. If you leave it to your customer to call you, you're going to miss a massive number of opportunities for close. And after a while, it's going to be like 2 or 3 weeks before they've called you and called you back. They're starting to feel a bit embarrassed. You're not going to call them again because you're starting to feel a bit embarrassed about not following up. And this is where that automation is really important to do. The other 2 in that context are from a one of them obviously is if someone says yes, what's your onboarding sequence? What's the process that you go through if someone says yes? Do you send a task to someone in your back office to get in touch with that customer for the next steps? Do you send them a what to do now email? Or do you send them a link to your digital order form that allows them to process that payment? What happens after someone says yes, and where do they go to next? The second one of those is someone says maybe. Right? There's plenty of times that someone says, I'm not really sure yet. Can you send me some more information? And all they're doing is giving you an opportunity to deal with some objections. And if you're not trying to close them on the spot right there, again, you can move them into the maybe follow-up process where you're sending them some additional information or some case studies of customers who have done things. And again, the end of that sequence is a task for you to chase up that person again. Don't just send people some stuff my pet hates is people who send proposals and then forget about them.
Right.
Don't send a proposal and then leave it for them to come back to you. Put a task at the end of that raises that task back to the surface again for you to chase them up. And the third one is if someone says no. And this is, I think, an area that a lot of businesses can really benefit from an automation, in that if someone says no to you, you don't just hang up the phone and say, well, that sucked. Let's move on to the next number on our list. Have a follow-up sequence that says, really appreciate the opportunity to chat to you about what it is that we do. Sorry, we're not the right fit for you. If you think circumstances should ever change, and even fish for a referral here, if circumstances should change, or should know someone who's a better fit for our solution, we'd love the introduction. Right? But then wait 6 months or 12 months or 3 months or whatever the period of time is, and bubble that person to the surface again. And this is where we can add them back into our retargeting lists on Facebook or at custom audiences. This is where we could have another re-engagement sequence with our customer that starts to go out and says, hey, look, it's been 12 months since we spoke to you about, insert problem here. How's that going for you? Is there anything I can do to help? Is there any doors I can open for you? The number of times I've done this and people, when you call them, they're like, oh my God, you're calling me back. Sometimes, yep, we're all good, thanks very much. Or my business is closed, or I bought another solution. I'm really happy with that. For other times, it's just come back up on the radar. Just yesterday, I called a company in New Zealand, and like, oh, this is perfect timing. We've got a board meeting, in this case today, to discuss what it is that we were talking about 6 months ago.
Perfect.
Now, if I hadn't called them back and put myself back at top of mind, they might have easily gone, who was that person I spoke to 6 months ago about that thing, that automation thing? And they'll just go back out to market and find whoever's top of mind on that particular occasion. So it keeps you sort of coming back to create the opportunity. I think
one thing for this, for people, is to really understand your customer's buying cycle. So you're not trying to create a whole new process. You're trying to automate the process that you already would have done, or say the process, like a sales team would have done 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Although do it with a little more tact than they would have done then. We're not doing Glenn Ross style here, but just understanding the cycle that your customer buys in, and every business has one, and understand that when you create automated flows.
Yeah, that's right. If you're selling sporting goods and every season someone buys, a new bat or a new ball or a new tennis racket or whatever it happens to be, you don't call them at 12 months, right? You call them at 11 months, because that's they're in their decision-making process to purchase something at 12 months. And if you're top of mind, they're more likely to buy from you.
Yeah, no doubt.
The other one that I've just mentioned before is that sort of onboarding and retention process. What happens when you get a new customer or you get a repeat customer? Right? So the first time you get a customer, you might send them down again, path A, which says, you're a brand new customer. Let me send you a welcome message from our CEO. Let me tell you what to expect when you work with us. If it's a repeat customer, it might be, hey, really appreciate your patronage. It's great to see you back again. Right? So, when someone purchases from you, you can kind of do these things. You can put them into automated cycles. So you could send one out and say, hey, look, thanks for buying from us. Can we grab your birthday? So we can send you a gift on your birthday. And we put people into an automated sequence that, a couple of days before their birthday, sends them a birthday card and says, happy birthday from all the team at Win More Clients. We can do things like send Christmas cards. We can send, hey, it's, Happy New Year. All the best for insert date, 2018, 2019, 2020. And even change up the messages each time before they sort of cycle back to the beginning. So, the flower sequence I mentioned earlier, I've got 5 different emails that go to her florist over an 18-month period, which changes the flowers and changes the message slightly. Now, by the time it gets back to the same message and potentially the same flowers, it's unlikely that my wife will ever recognise the fact that the whole thing is automated, apart from the fact she knows I've done it.
Or if she listens,
she watched the video. she watched the live video where I built it. But that's the kind of thing we've got. You can create these sort of very long-term sequences that your customer doesn't really remember that the message you're sending them is the same message as you sent them 7 years ago.
Right.
If you create some slight variation in the ones, if you send them the same message every single week and say, "Hey, buy from me. Hey, buy from me. Hey, buy from me," they're probably going to get a little bit of shits. But if you change it up each time and are clever about how you build some of these follow-up sequences, you can do that sort of stuff. So, hey, 1 year might be Happy New Year. Next one might be, from all the team at so-and-so, we wish you an amazing insert date. Next year might be best of luck for this year. Hope you've had an amazing year previously. And then you might cycle back to the beginning and it says Happy New Year. Your customer, you're just one message out of all the messages that your customer is going to receive, but you're nurturing and retaining the relationship. Again, just like your marriage, if you don't do anything after you're married, you're going to be divorced very quickly. But if you remember flowers and birthdays and anniversaries, chances are that you're going to continue to nurture and retain that relationship for much longer than you otherwise would.
Perfectly true. Yeah. So was there?
And again, you can start up based on what people click on, what people interact with, what pages on the website they go to, whether they're already following you or not following you, those sorts of things.
Yeah. So it's a combination of being a little premeditated to first build it out, and then also a little bit of thought going into it about if this, then that. So if they go here, do this. If they do this, do this. So just understanding your business thoroughly and taking the time to think about it. And, for people listening that think it's overwhelming, one, you can reach out to Tim and he does this stuff. Two, you don't necessarily have to build the perfect campaign right away. By just starting and taking some steps to add some automation, it's going to make your life easier and start to improve your business. And the system you build today might not be the system you have 2 years from now. Just start building it is the point.
Yeah, that's right. We know your business evolves. You change the way you present your product. You change what's important to you. You change, which direction you want to point people to. But you build and you continue to evolve. When I've still got one that I do from a networking follow-up that gets me in meetings with about 84% of the people I send it to, because I'm tying it into a bunch of different things. They're seeing my brand appear on Facebook because everyone who goes into that sequence is added to a custom segment on Facebook that starts to show my brand. Now, after I have that face-to-face meeting and I move them into the next step, they're moved into another custom audience, which shows a different ad because they're at a different stage in my customer cycle. I start to put a message up for everybody at Christmas that says Merry Christmas, right? And it's a different ad, but I'm also I'm sending out different messages at the same time. So we're using this sort of multi-channel sort of communication, and having, in this case, Infusionsoft for me be the core of the engine that remembers to do all this stuff. Right? I'm trying to get, in the context of my business, I'm trying to get married to lots and lots of people at the same time. And every one of those relationships is at a different stage of that process. If I was only trying to get married to one person, absolutely, I can keep it in my head, but I'm not. Our business survives on lots of relationships at different stages of that life cycle.
Definitely. And I'll add one thing that, for the people who ever would consider selling your business, having this stuff in place makes your business extremely attractive to a buyer.
Yeah.
If somebody comes in and you tell them you have all these systems built and all these processes and all this stuff been already put in there, the value of your company increases over your competitors.
Yeah. And that's right. And the reason for that is that someone wants to be able to come in and have everything work without them necessarily having to be in the business. The more redundant you make yourself, because you've got systems and processes either through people or through automation platforms. The more likely, the more attractive and the higher value that business, the higher multiple that business has.
No doubt. Did you have one more thing that we needed to cover?
I think that's probably those are the ones I would generally recommend everyone sort of look at. Have a look at, get a big whiteboard and map it out. What happens when someone does something, and equally important, what happens when someone doesn't do the action you want them to? Where do you move them to? At what point do you get rid of this prospect and say, look, they're not really my ideal customer. They can get out of my database and go somewhere else.
Yep.
That's probably the biggest one. What happens, not just what happens when people do the action you want them to do, right? Those are the people you're using right now. But the vast majority of people are not yet ready to buy from you. Where do you put them, and how long do you put them for, and what's the sequence of activity that nurtures them back into the action that you want them to take?
So if people are listening, we talked earlier about lead magnets. Go ahead and give one of yours that perhaps touches on some of the stuff we talked about.
Yep. Sorry, so was it Jaron?
So we talked about lead magnets earlier. Mention a lead magnet that you have that people can opt in, and then they can start to see how some of this stuff works. Add them to audiences, and
yes,
yeah.
I've got one lead magnet I've just recently built. It's called the Marketing Quiz, and the idea of it helps you look at which aspect of your marketing you should be focusing on. A lot of people, I know for yourself, Jared, and for myself, say I need more leads. And that may not necessarily be the problem in your business, the biggest hole. Not necessarily where you should be committing more resources right now if there are other problems in your business. So that's on my website at winmoreclients.com.au/marketing-quiz. And people are sort of more than welcome to check that out. It's a pretty complex one, but it gives people a good idea about the kinds of things that are possible with it. And hopefully people find it insightful as they go through.
And we'll put the link in the show notes. If you're driving, do not pull over. Just scroll below once you park.
Absolutely. Jared, thanks for your time today. It was awesome being on your podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I'm sure some people got some value out of it, and I encourage you to connect with Tim, check out that lead magnet, and get added into his sequence and watch how it works.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Get Found Radio podcast. If you like the show, please hit subscribe to listen to some amazing upcoming episodes. We would also love if you left us an honest rating and review.